All right. I think you can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
That's how you start every Zoom call. Yeah, I cannot see my screen, and I would like to. Oh, now it's better. So, hello. Welcome to the last Ruby conference this year. You are here. The next one will be next year. So, all over the world, there are no more Ruby conferences for 2025. Yeah, and we're ending on the tiny one in Helsinki. Do you know this statue? They modify it sometimes. Like during the pandemic, they put masks on those guys. Yeah, so I put rubies. Okay, Ruby. You know the language, right? How big is Ruby? We have tiny Rubicons. I asked Claude how big is Ruby, and he come up with this thing. This is lines of code over time in the Ruby repository. It is, of course, Claude, so it's basically a lie. Ruby didn't start it in 1998. It started earlier, and also this is not the first Ruby. Remember Yarv? Started by Koichi Sasada. Yeah, so Yarv is the second implementation of Ruby. At some point, it became the official Ruby, the C Ruby. But you can go further back and get the smaller, more original Ruby. On the website, the earliest version is 1.6 something, 1.67, but you can go even further if you go to the download server. And the earliest one available is even older than the one that was officially released, which is 0.90 something. So the earliest one is 0.49. And you can install it on a modern Mac thanks to Sam Westerman, if I'm not mistaken. So you can compile this Ruby 0.49 on a newest MacBook right now because somebody is maintaining the patches to that particular Ruby. It looks slightly different, like there is no .each. The constant use different variables. There is a print method on every object, so it's slightly different, but it's still recognizably Ruby. And if you download it and if you count the lines of code, it is small, but there are other ways to be small, and we can do much more modern Ruby, right? Because the size in the lines is not the only metric. There's this thing. Have you ever wrote any code in mruby? There's always someone, at least one guy. Okay, so you'll be our dedicated mruby guy. mruby, what does the M stands for? It stands for many things. Some people call it mini Ruby because mruby is a lightweight implementation of Ruby. Has some limitations, like you don't get the new features, you're going to get ractors or stuff, but it's still recognizably Ruby. There is a different set of Ruby gems because the ones that we have in normal Ruby are not compatible, but it is still something that you can use. A lot of people call it embedded Ruby, but it's not embedded in terms it's only used for embedded development, but you can embed this into another language. So this is normally how you use mruby. You actually have some program written in something else, like C, and you can call mruby, Ruby code by starting a virtual machine of Ruby, then executing code, and then waiting for results, or even handing off all the control to Ruby if you want. It's also Matt's Ruby. Like, I don't know if you guys know that, but Matt's is mainly working on mruby. He's very active, lots of commits. He's in the team as a lead. So this is actually the Ruby that Mats is working on. And the reason why most of you might not have heard of mruby is because this is basically Japanese only invention. Like there are a lot of companies writing mruby, but most of them, including the sponsors of the project, are in Japan. And mruby is not as popular outside of Japan as it is in Japan. So looking at the logo, it is playful. So what can we write in mruby? Like, what's the actual use case of those? This is a game from 2017 called Nier Automata. And this thing is written in Ruby. In mruby, to be exact. Like, not the 3D engine, of course, because that's written in C++, but this thing was actually written, like scripted, using Ruby. All the logic in the game is written in Ruby. It got very high scores on gaming sites. Ruby is actually something that is like a component listed in the game's credits. And it took a year for the Ruby team to actually find it out. Here is a tweet from Aaron, because he's shocked that Near is using Ruby code. When people found out, they obviously extracted Ruby out of the game. They also misspelled the name, but that's fine. And it took them a couple more years to write a decompiler specifically for the game. Like, this works on any Ruby, but in the README there's a mention that this was specifically written for that game. And of course, because you already have the code, you have the decompiler, so you write some modding tools for the game. Yeah, so now we have a AAA game written for PlayStation, written for Windows game, and I think there are also ports for other systems. If they're not, they will be probably in the future. But we have a AAA game, like a hit video game, written in Ruby. So if somebody tells you that you can't write games in Ruby, yes, you can, and you can make millions. Of course, most people start with something else, something like Dragon Ruby, which has a really nice talk explaining how to write video games using mruby. Dragon Ruby uses a fork of mruby. And even for Unity, there is a plugin to write games in mruby. So you can actually use mruby for video game development. Of course, it's all fun and games, but there are other use cases. Yeah, let's put more rubies into it. This is not the satellite written in Ruby. This is. This thing flies over Japan. It has 100 kilograms of metal flying over Japan, looking for infrastructure changes, mostly to like after disaster recovery and then maintenance. And this thing is actually written also in mruby. The last launch of the last satellite was just 2 weeks ago. They have like 14 now of those. Why did they write them in mruby? Other than they were Japanese, so of course they use Ruby. mruby is small, it's safe, and you can just re-upload the script and not touch the main firmware of the satellite. So you can update the satellites very easily, and it's low risk. That's a very important use for this small Ruby. There are also more boring use cases, like you can use mruby as a language in Nginx. Heroku build packs use mruby. And there is this thread on GitHub of mruby that you can find random people posting what did they use mruby for. But these are like boring. If you want to take a photo, I can wait for a second. But of course, this will be also probably filmed. If not, I will share the presentation with you later. So here's another cool one. Will the video start? This is a boxing robot written in mruby, and I think the server is written in regular Ruby. This is from Ruby Kaigi a couple of years back. She used the false perspective to demonstrate the robot, and the reason for this is you can't really bring a 2-meter robot into Japan, at least not easily. But it's a kickboxing robot written in Ruby. But of course, this is small Ruby, and we are tiny Ruby. And small isn't tiny, right? There is a smaller Ruby called mruby-c. This one is like super niche, but it's still very useful. It doesn't have some of the features, once again, of the mruby. Like, for example, there is no garbage collection, which might be a benefit, as you can see later. It runs on things that have 40 kilobytes of memory. So embedded systems, Arduinos. I've actually wanted to do, it runs even on a toaster. And it should, but I couldn't find the exact toaster online. But some of the toasters have 80 kilobytes of memory and compatible processor. So you can run this Ruby on a toaster if you really want to. 40 kilobytes versus 400 for mruby. So it's even smaller. If you look at the code written in mruby-c, you can see that this is basically normal Ruby. There is nothing special about it. You have classes, you have objects, you have methods, you have fields, you have constants. Everything works pretty much the same as regular Ruby. I have given you the QR code for this because this is an interesting piece of code. This is 200 lines of code. I cut it off, obviously, because it's too big to fit on the slide. But this is 200 lines of code. They will give you a Flappy Bird clone written in Ruby. But that's not the most amazing part of this. This code runs on this thing. And this is slightly a lie, because it doesn't really run on this thing. It runs on a chip inside of the cartridge. The chip inside of the cartridge is actually slightly faster than the chip inside the console, which is funny. There is a trend of writing mruby and mrubyc code on weird old consoles. Like if you want to do a Ruby Kaigi talk, like the biggest Ruby conference in the world talk, and you are not a contributor, this is the easiest path you can take. I know that I did that. This machine is original Sony PlayStation dev kit. This is the machine that used to write games for PlayStation before they released a PlayStation, because after that you could use a modified console or a special console. Accidentally, this is also extremely similar to what Mats used to write the first Ruby, because he used the Sony News Workstation, and this is Sony News Workstation. He used the version from 1994. This is 1995. Oh, maybe I've got the dates wrong. But this is basically around the same year. So Mats recognized this machine. I asked him for a photo of his machine, but he couldn't find it. But this is Sony PlayStation Developers Kit. And this is the one that I found at some flea market. This is PlayStation debugging unit, which will read any code, so we can write games for PlayStation. So I took some time, and I wrote this. This is a spinning Ruby, written in Ruby, running on the original PlayStation. The code isn't amazing. I was a little bit ashamed of showing it to Mats, but it looks like this. This is the C code that runs mrubyc. So basically, it starts the virtual machine. As I define some like memory pool space to run the code. The code it's already compiled to MRB, so it's basically just a constant with the bytecode for Ruby. And then you assign the native extensions, as I would call it, because you basically tell it, okay, if the user runs this method in Ruby, run this native code. And the code in Ruby looks like this. So it's mostly calling to native methods. It still runs Ruby, though. Like, this is still doing something in Ruby and displaying it on the console. The port itself of mrubyc is extremely short. This is all the code that I need to write to make the mrubyc run on the PlayStation, which is basically hardware abstraction layer. So you have the Ruby. You know that it compiles on this specific kinds of a processor. So you just have to give it a few methods that you have to fill in so it understands how to interact with something that is system specific, like the output. Like, there is no console on the PlayStation, right? But you have to write something if you want the puts to write. So there isn't that much code. The make file was a little bit longer, but that's mostly because of the PlayStation SDK. And then I found out that there's actually already an implementation of mruby, the bigger one, on the PlayStation, which makes the PlayStation the fastest growing Ruby platform. Yeah. But it's, once again, it's not all about video games. There is this thing. These are smart glasses, but not the kind with like a display and all this stuff. This is the kind that will make you see things sharp, no matter how far they are, because they autofocus on different things. And these were written in mrubyc as well. You can buy those. They are not cheap. They are mostly aimed at older folks. And this is just one of the use cases of mruby. Another one is this thing. It's a sewing machine. All of the machines done by Yuki actually use mrubyc. So they were written in Ruby. There is a quote from a guy who wrote some of those embedded systems that the nice part about mrubyc is that you don't get the garbage collection, so you don't get garbage collection pauses. So you can do real-time systems using Ruby. And this was used in many, many places. There is a sake brewery that runs mrubyc. There were 2 talks. This is the one in English, so you probably want this one. That runs mrubyc to measure parameters for various different kinds of equipment used to brew sake. This is how it looks like. This is, of course, not my slide. But the guy who wrote that, he also attends this conference. Keep conference or keep Kaigi on whatever they name because they changed the name and location. But they are always around Ruby conferences, either Ruby Kaigi, Ruby World, or something like that. These are the conference for people who use mechanical keyboards. These are really popular in Japan. I don't know why. I don't understand. But if they do like a sponsor booth at Ruby Kaigi, they usually have custom keycaps for you with the logos of the sponsors. And I've heard the story. I don't know if it's true that one Ruby Kaigi, there were so many people using mechanical keyboards in the common area. It got so noisy. They told them, organize a separate conference for those. Like do the talks, do everything, but keep those keyboards away from the conference. It might not be true, but I wouldn't be surprised. And by the way, this BMW gear shifter is also a keyboard. It's used to switch the modes in Vim. It's written by Aaron Patterson. Yeah, and some of those will run Ruby, because the guy who wrote the stuff for the Sake Brewery, he also wrote the custom firmware for keyboard that runs mruby. And this is pretty amazing, because you can write some mruby code on your computer using mruby keyboard. Everything is Ruby if you like look close enough. And I would like to go even smaller. Is it possible to go even smaller? What do you think? Yeah, there is. This is pretty new, by the way. This is like 3 months. There is a Ruby implementation for Z80. It's super incomplete. It will run just the simplest code, like addition, or maybe some like very simple operations. Z80 is the chip that is used in the original Game Boy. Yeah, it's much older than Ruby itself, and the code. There are lots of to-dos, but the guy who wrote this, he actually wrote the code for the Ruby on a Dreamcast. Definitely the other port of the Ruby for PlayStation. I think the GameCube and Wii. So I'm pretty sure he will get this running, which will make it the tiniest Ruby ever. Thank you very much.